Good evening, everyone, and welcome into Season 2, Episode 3 of the Forge Podcast, brought to you by Shotgun Sports Network Alabama of the Shotgun Sports Network. My name is Ryan Messer, and we've got a lot to get into. We've got 2 weeks worth of stuff from the Bulls, the Squadron, and the Stallions to get you caught up on, and including the Barons as well. So, before we get too far, I want to thank you guys for watching on YouTube and on Facebook. Continued support on all of those platforms. Thank you guys for all of that. Also, we're trying to work out what's going on with our feeds for the iHeart, the Audible, and Spotify and Apple Podcasts. What's going on there? So once we get that figured out, we will make an announcement on the page. But we also want to thank you guys for support there. Also, we've got to thank Blue Spring Living Water for their continued support throughout the past year. They've been supporting us for a long time. They've been keeping us hydrated, and they want to keep you hydrated as well. So take a step toward a healthier life with Blue Spring Living Water and keep hydrated this spring and summer season as it continues to be winter right now, but it's going to be getting warmer, so make sure you get Blue Spring Living Water. It is bottled and sourced right down the road in Blount County, Alabama, and there's no contamination like you'll see in most water sources there, so make sure you hit them up on bluespringlivingwater.com for more information. And with that, this is episode 2 of season 2 of the Forge Podcast. Starting things off with the Birmingham Bulls, who had a few transactions last Monday where they wound up releasing Tobias Ojic and Tyler Penner. So wish them well on their next endeavors there. Then on Friday, we saw 2 weeks ago, Friday, we saw them take on the Pensacola Ice Flyers. Things started off with Brody Clays in the net for the Ice Flyers and Lotzie in for the Bulls. The Bulls went on the power play early, just 6 minutes and 11 seconds into the opening period. Shortly after the unsuccessful power play expired, Kyler Matthews got tied up with Lucas Jurowski of the Ice Flyers, sending them both to the box for roughing charges. Then 7:48 left to play in the open period. The Ice Flyers were able to get a puck past Lotzie, breaking the threshold there. In the second, McGregor Sinclair was charged with a trip just 5:27 into the second period. Apart from the unsuccessful penalty kill, the remainder of the second period was primarily uneventful. So going on into the third period, it started with Jared Christie finding the back of the net just 6:20 into the third period there to tie the game. And then a minute 28 later, Trevor Thurston was charged with a charge there, and they were able to actually capitalize on that to retake the lead just 10 seconds in. Then, with just over a minute later, Tony Pentagon was able to answer back with a goal of his own to tie the game up again. Then, in the overtime period, the Ice Flyers got things started by putting the Bulls on the power play for an unsportsmanlike penalty there, and Taylor Brierley was able to capitalize just under a minute later to win it for the Bulls. The next night, things started off with Clays again in the net for the Ice Flyers and Stewie in for the Bulls. The game got started with the Ice Flyers scoring just 8:21 in the first period. Then just over 3 minutes later, Phil Ledzianko was charged with a hook. Then under a minute later, the Bulls went on the power play for a trip. 19 seconds later, Jamie Dorsey wound up slamming into Brody Clays, and he wound up getting charged for a match penalty for that, plus the double major. But he was later handed out a 8-game suspension for that, which is a bit much considering Clays did give up his protection by leaving the crease there, but a little bit controversial there, but Clays did suffer a head injury and had to be helped off the ice. This wound up sending Cody Karpinski in in his place, and then the Ice Flyer must take an exception to that because Preston Kugler wound up instigating a brawl with Trevor Thurston with the Pensacola getting minors for unsportsmanlike for the instigator, and then double major for aggressor, tacked on to the major for the fighting, putting the Bulls on a 5-3 man advantage. In the second, the Ice Flyers were called for a cross check, but due to a Pentagon slash, they did not go on the power play. But a minute later, the Bulls did go on the power play for a high stick, and Colton Olnick was able to capitalize on that just 9 seconds in. And then 2.5 minutes later, the Bulls were able to get a breakaway goal assisted by a Pentagon and Stewie. Not many times you get an assist from the goaltender there. But right at the midway point of the second, Matt Clark was charged with a hold. Then former Bulls Weisner was charged with Kyler Matthews for delay penalties, sending the Bulls on a penalty kill. And then a minute later, the Ice Flyers were charged with interference. Unable to capitalize, the Bulls did go back on the power play for a too many men penalty just 2.5 minutes later. And then with 44 left to play, Kip Ledzianko got tied up with Tim Faulkner, both receiving roughing charges. In the third, the Ice Flyers were able to tie it up just over 8 minutes left to play in regulation. In overtime, the Ice Flyers were able to score right off the opening face-off to win it for Pensacola, splitting the series there. Then on President's Day, which we observed last week, the Bulls took on the Huntsville Havoc. Things started out with Tody Coburn in the net for the Havoc and Lotzi in for the Bulls. Phil Ledzianko got things going early by putting the puck in the net, back of the net, just a minute 54 into the game. That was answered with Colton Olnick just 4 minutes later with a goal of his own. Just past the midway mark of the opening period, the Havoc wound up pulling Troy Coburn, but he returned seconds later when Ben Higgins was placed in the box for a high stick, unable to capitalize on the power play, but they did wound up scoring just after the power play expired. 36 seconds later, the Bulls wound up pulling lots. It was not long because they wound up going on a power play for a cross check, and Taylor Brierley was able to capitalize on that one just 16 seconds in. In the second period, started out with McGregor Sinclair finding the net just 128 uh, minutes into the second period there. Um, then the Bulls did go on a penalty kill just 4 minutes later um, for Trevor Thurston interference call. After killing that penalty, the Bulls did get stuck again as Colton Olnick was able to score, did strike again as Colton Olnick was able to score another goal. Then the Havoc went back on the power play as just under a minute later, a minute to play in the second period, as Nikita Kozarev wound up getting called for a trip. Coming out of the opening faceoff in the third period, they were able to capitalize on that power play. Phil Ledzianko wound up answering just 4 minutes later with a goal of his own, his second of the game. The Bulls went back on the power play for a hook just 3.5 minutes later. Then, just over 5 minutes later, Kyler Matthews dropped gloves with Havoc's Benito Poza. Both of them receiving majors there. And then the pair barely had time to get to the penalty box before the Havoc committed a trip, sending the Bulls on a power play. And Phil Ledzianko was able to capitalize and collect a hat trick, sealing it for the Bulls, winning it 5-2 there in Pelham. Then on Friday, this past Friday, they wound up going up to Fayetteville, take on a series with the Marksmen. This game started out with Mason Bopit in the net for the Marksmen and Lotzie in for the Bulls. The game started with the Bulls going on a penalty kill for McGregor St. Clair delay penalty early. Then the Marksmen were able to capitalize on that just 20 seconds left in the penalty. And the Bulls wound up going on the power play for a slash just over 8 minutes later. Unable to capitalize on that in the second, the Bulls wound up going on a penalty kill for a Matt Clark unsportsmanlike penalty there. 42 seconds later, they wound up going on 3-on-3 as Taylor Brierly got tied up with two of the Marksmen, earning them both roughing charges. 4 minutes later, Kip Ledzianko was able to level the score. And then just a minute later, the Bulls went on a power play for a hold. In the third period, the Bulls wound up going back on the power play for a delay 5.5 minutes in. Nikita Kozarev was able to capitalize on that just under a minute later. And then in the 42 seconds later, Kyle Powell was charged with an illegal check to the head, earning him a match penalty and a suspension there. So, unfortunate there. Kip Ledzianko wound up serving the double major for him. But Carson Rose was able to score a shorthanded goal just 2.5 minutes into the power play or the penalty there. After the penalty was finished, the Marksmen wound up pulling Bopit just past the 17 minute mark there of the final period. And then the strategy wound up working because just a minute later, because they wound up scoring. They pulled him again just after the following face-off, and this time it resulted in a Kip Ledzianko dumping the puck into the empty net. And then they pulled him again. This time, Tony Apetagon was able to hit the empty net. Just 5 seconds left in the match, sealing it for the Bulls. Right as it stands right now, they are sitting at 18, 20, and 4. The Huntsville Havoc is sitting at number 1. Peoria Rivermen are second, and Roanoke Yard Dogs are third place, with the Bulls in 6th place. The upcoming games are as follows: are a home and away with Huntsville on Friday and Saturday. Home on Friday, and then up in Huntsville on Saturday. Switching things over to the Birmingham Squadron. The 12th on the 12th, we saw them take on the Westchester Knicks, which started off with Keon Brooks hitting a three right off the opening tip. Both teams wound up trading shots and leads early before the Knicks wound up taking an 11-point lead midway through the opening quarter. Capitalizing on a few defensive rebounds, the Knicks wound up able to secure a 33-point lead going into the second. Birmingham had some key rebounds themselves in the second, quickly chipping away and cutting the lead down to 9 at the end of the half. Coming out of the locker room at the half, the three started falling for the Bulls, and that with the continuity of the rebounding for the Squadron, they wound up tying it up several times midway through the third quarter before the Knicks wound up quickly rebuilding a 9-point lead going into the final quarter of play. But Birmingham's rebound game wound up putting them with a single score lead within a single score going into the fourth quarter. Both teams going back and forth, and Birmingham finally retook the lead with 3.5 left to play, and they were able to guard the rim really well to secure a much-needed win, 126 to 119 at home there. Then we saw on the 13th versus the Indiana Mad Ants. Indiana was able to capitalize early off some rebounds, jumping out to a 7-0 lead. But they went back and forth through the early minutes, and Birmingham was able to cut the lead down to 1 midway through the first quarter. But they went on a 10-point run, but then it went back and forth shootout through the remainder of the quarter, with Indiana holding a 9-point lead going into the second. Indiana wound up stretching their lead throughout the second quarter, capitalizing on rebounds and steals there, with Indiana leading by 11 going into halftime. Birmingham's turnovers wound up haunting them in the second half as well, as the Indiana Mad Gnats extended their lead to over 20 by midway through the third quarter and held it going into the fourth. Both teams wound up trading blows early minutes of the fourth, but Indiana was able to play really well defensively to protect their lead through the remainder of the game, beating the Squadron at home 127 to 105. On this past Thursday, we saw Birmingham go to Detroit to take on the Motor City Cruise. Both teams went back and forth early through the opening minutes before Birmingham wound up jumping out to a 6-point lead midway through the first quarter. The Cruise was able to cut the lead to a single score, but Birmingham wound up holding their lead through the remainder of the opening quarter. Motor City came out hot in the second, reclaiming the lead and taking an 8-point lead. But Birmingham wound up going on a run of their own by tying it up midway through the second quarter, but that didn't last long as the Cruise quickly retook the lead and extended it going into the locker room at halftime, 51 to 42. The defensive output by Motor City continued into the third quarter by quickly extending their lead to double digits. This lead lasted through the third quarter, and in the fourth, Birmingham tried to push harder defensively, but it just was not enough to stay the Cruise, as they were constantly extending their lead there, eventually ending with a score of 109 to 83, Birmingham falling to the Cruise in Motor City. Saturday, we wound up taking a trip up to Ohio to take on the Cleveland Charge. The game started out with both teams going back and forth with some really great shooting from behind the arc and some great rebounding. Birmingham jumped to a 7-point lead midway through the opening period of play there. That didn't last long as the Charge was able to make a comeback off some rebounds of their own, but they traded leads for a while before going into the second, with Birmingham leading 27-26. They wound up starting the second quarter trading blows before Birmingham racked up some boards, resulting in a 8-point lead midway through the second quarter. Then, but with 2 minutes left before halftime, the Charge wound up going on a 13-point run to lead the Squadron 49-44 at the end of the half. Cleveland started the second half, extending their lead to 12, but Birmingham was quickly on the mark by cutting away at that lead and tying it up midway through the third quarter. They wound up going back and forth, but Birmingham was able to sink some good 3-point shots and to build a lead of 75-68 going into the fourth quarter. They wound up starting the final quarter of play by trading blows, but Birmingham did what they do best, by racking up some good defensive rebounds, turning them into points, and eventually leading by 13 midway through the quarter there. And then the Charge wound up trying to make a comeback, but Birmingham was able to hold on, winning it 104-100. And then on Sunday, they had another game there up there in Cleveland. The game started out with the Charge quickly jumping out to a 5-0 lead. They maintained the lead throughout the majority of the opening quarter. And then Birmingham did tie it up multiple times, but the Charge wound up pulling away a bit, leading by 5 going into the second. The Charge wound up protecting their lead in the second, eventually extending it to double digits midway through, but they wound up trading blows, but some good shooting by Lester Quinones chipped away at their lead down to 5 by halftime. Coming out of the locker room at half, Birmingham quickly retook the lead with some rebounds and some great shooting led by Lester Quinones. But they eventually led by double digits midway through the third. Trading blows before the Squadron wound up collecting some rebounds, helping them extend their lead to 27 going into the fourth. In the fourth quarter, the Charge wound up playing much more physically, and they wound up trying to make a comeback, chipping away at the lead, but Birmingham was able to hold on to it, maintaining their lead, and sealing the sweep of the Charge by winning 106-95 on the road. In this game, Lester Quinones had a career-high 39 points in this game, so great performance by the entire team, but really great seeing how well he's shooting, especially from behind the arc there. As it stands right now, Birmingham's sitting at 7-14, and Birmingham is in 15th place, up one from last time we had this podcast in the Eastern Conference of the NBA G League. Coming up this week, we've got Thursday taking on the last place Windy City Bulls. They're actually having a watch party at the BJCC, if I'm not mistaken. And then the Delaware Bluecoats will come back to town on Sunday. So can't wait to see you guys out there. We really need the support out there for the Squadron. On switching things over to the Birmingham Stallions. Last Monday, we wound up having a couple transactions where we released O'Shea Dugas and wound up signing Keaton Sutherland, both of them being guards. So getting ready for camp, which we found out yesterday is going to start next week. So next week they'll arrive in Arlington and get everybody signed up, get the photos up and all of that. The physicals, all that jazz. We know how it goes. But today they wound up announcing rule changes. And what I do not like is the kickoff. They are going back to the XFL style kickoff, which was adopted by the NFL last season. They'll kick from the 30. Only the kicker and the receivers can move until the ball is in play and caught. The remaining players are lined up on the 40 and 30 respectively. Um, the ball must be kicked at least 40 yards. Receiving team must be will get unless or the kicking team or the receiving team will be set up at the 40, and then the ball lands inside the 35 without being retrieved by the receiving team. Will be touchback at the 20. If the ball is kicked into the end zone, it will result in touchback at the 35-yard line. Again, not the biggest fan of this. It again, it's not. I don't see that as football. It's not traditional to football. I know that this league is the league of innovation, and they're trying to save, injuries, stuff like that. But again, not big fan. One thing I am a big fan of, and I'm glad to say that they are doing, is the Coaches Challenge is having a little bit of a tweak. They are going to have the same challenge where they can make a challenge on any call, no call, spot, whatever, as long as they say, hey, they have to identify specifically what they are challenging. But this year, new to this season, they are bringing in a second challenge if the first challenge is successful. So everything else the same. You have to keep your timeouts, so to keep your challenges, all that jazz. So I really like that. Another thing, they are not doing onside kicks this year. Just kind of, they're really taking the kicker out of the game for the most part, except for the kickoff. It's kind of, I don't know. But considering we've had two really good kickers, two Pro Bowl kickers come out of this league, the spring league there, you would consider, changing that. So they were keeping the 4th and 20 and 12 from the 28 option. So, and they are still not doing a PAT, a single point PAT, for a kick this year, which Moose had mentioned to us earlier this year. So, guess that never followed through. So, switching things over to the Birmingham Barons. The specialty jerseys were released this past week, with mental health awareness being worn on Friday, May the 2nd. Star Wars being Saturday, May the 2nd. May the 3rd, I apologize. Birmingham Black Barons for the Rick Wood Classic on Wednesday, June the 4th. Los Barons on Saturday, June the 7th. And then Juneteenth jerseys on Thursday, June 19th. Then we also have Harry Potter jerseys on Saturday, June the 21st, as well as Margaritaville jerseys being worn on Friday, July the 18th. So, really cool designs. If you haven't seen them, check out them. I've shared them on X and on Facebook. So, check those out. Also, the weekly promotions have got a little tweak. Most of them are staying the same, but on Tuesday, which 2 years ago it was $2 Tuesdays on Tuesdays in 2013, but last year they switched things up, I guess, because $2 Tuesdays kind of messing with their profits. But they switched over to Taco Tuesday last season. I really like the Taco Tuesdays because the tacos were really, really good, seasoned well. But they're going now to Hometown Heroes on Tuesdays. Wednesdays are still going to be Wet Nose Wednesdays, but they're changing the name to Bark in the Park and adding $3 wine specials to that. They are also bringing back Thirsty Thursday, as they have been for a long time, with the $2.50 beer and seltzers. Friday night fireworks is back as always. Then on Saturdays, they're now calling Magic City Saturday. And not sure. I reached out to the Barons to find out what exactly that is. Haven't received anything back yet. So, but Sunday is family day as always. Um, so kids running the bases and all of that comes with it. And then lastly, we found out today that Kurt, longtime radio broadcaster for the Birmingham Barons, Kurt Bloom is retiring from his role of calling the games for the Birmingham Barons. Um, Kurt's been doing it for 32 years, 33 years. Um, he's, I mean, dude's been a legend here in the city for years. So, CB, we wish you the best and whatever the ventures uh, come your way, man. Thank you for all of you done for the city and for the Barons. So, um, really hard to see CB leave the Barons there. But in closing, we've got a full week this week. We've got Squadron games. We've got Bulls, the home and away there. And we're still trying to keep you updated on the roster. Camp starts next week for the UFL, so it's not going to be long till we're going to have. We've got the season starts next month, and it's just a month away. So, but that's all I've got for this week. You guys have a great night. See you guys next week.